This footage, taken inside a submarine deep in the Greenland Sea, captures a strange humanoid sea creature. A large webbed hand shocks the crew, and we catch a quick glimpse of the creature before it swims off.
I don't think anybody can dive in Bimini and not believe that these are man-made artifacts.
The ocean is deep, vast, and often terrifying. Who knows what lurks in those crystal marine waters? 80% of it remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored.
A sunken city rediscovered after thousands of years, crystals and pyramids on the ocean floor, China's Atlantis, and more. These are ancient structures found in the ocean that shouldn't exist. The submerged city of Pavlo-Petri, found off the coast of southern Greece, is believed to be over 5,000 years old, making it the oldest known sunken city in the world. Discovered in 1967 by Nicholas Fleming, it's an ancient settlement almost perfectly preserved, with its streets, buildings, and tombs all sitting underwater. Over time, earthquakes and rising sea levels submerged the place around 1000 BCE, and it never resurfaced. The city was a trading hub. There's evidence that it had connections with Crete and other civilizations of the time. Excavations have revealed 15 well-planned buildings and a complex water system. These people were skilled engineers. With high-tech tools like sonar mapping and underwater robots, archaeologists have been able to create a 3D digital map of the city, giving us a closer look at its layout and how it would have functioned. The mystery of crystal pyramids in the Bermuda Triangle has been talked about since the 60s. The first real claim came from a man named Dr. Ray Brown, who, while scuba diving off the coast of the Bahamas, reported coming across this underwater pyramid.
That he came across the most magnificent find of all. In the murkiness, he spotted the tip of a submerged pyramid, barely visible above the ocean floor.
He described it as being made of a crystal-like material, even saying he was able to retrieve a piece of it, but that his camera equipment was destroyed in a storm, thus he was unable to return with actual photographic evidence of the pyramid. Dubious for sure, but since then more stories about underwater pyramids have spread. And then again, the documentary that his story comes from was narrated by Leonard Nimoy, so I can see why people were so intrigued. I mean, it's Mr. Spock. I'd believe it too. Pyramids were found at a depth of 2,000 meters. The report claimed that they were 3 times bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramids were allegedly made of this crystal-like substance. The thing is, Dr. Meyer Verlag has never been verified to exist. So, is this an actual find or just another piece of Bermuda Triangle folklore? Off the coast of Malta, a discovery in 1999 started a bit of a debate. They're known as the underwater temples of Gebel Gol Bahar. Hubert Zeitmer, a retired businessman, discovered the ruins. Zeitmer wasn't a scientist, and he was into the whole ancient astronauts conspiracy stuff, so a lot of people dismissed his findings, but that doesn't mean it's not intriguing. There hasn't been an official study into this, but unofficial research has claimed that the ruins could be thousands of years old. Some even think this area was once inhabited and could have been submerged by a massive flood, possibly the same one described in the Bible. Now, of course, mainstream scholars aren't really buying this theory, with some arguing that the rocks and boulders are just the result of illegal dumping, but it's not just the structures themselves that have people talking. There are also cart ruts, grooves in the seabed that stretch into the water, similar to ones found on the island of Malta itself, which means this area might have been on dry land at one point in time. What you're looking at here are the submerged ruins of a long-lost city called Xichang, aka China's Atlantis. It's pretty spectacular. It sits beneath the waters of Qingdao Lake in the Zhejiang province. The city of Xichang, or Lion City, was once a bustling metropolis during the Ming and Qing dynasties, but in 1959, it was intentionally flooded to create the Xing'an Dam and its hydroelectric station, which caused nearly 300,000 people to be relocated. The city was forgotten until 2001, when the Chinese government sent an expedition to explore what remained of this lost city. But it wasn't until 2011 that the discovery really took off. The Chinese National Geography published photos and illustrations showing what the city might have looked like before it sank. And what's wild is how well preserved the place is now. There are hundreds of archways with these intricate carvings of lions and dragons and phoenixes. Some inscriptions even date back to 1777. Because the water protects the ruins from weathering, Xichang looks almost as if it were frozen in time, and divers from all over the world come to explore the area. Bimini Road was found off the coast of Bimini Island in the Bahamas in 1968 by Joseph Mason Valentine. The site consists of these large, flat stones arranged in a straight line across the seabed, leading many to believe that it could be the ancient remains of a city. As Valentine explored the area further, he uncovered more outlines of possible ruins around the road. Some were quick to point out that it seemed like evidence of the lost city of Atlantis, arguing that the stones were just clearly too uniform to be some natural formation. Mainstream scientists, though, think that the road is the result of nature, that erosion over a long period of time has just created this illusion of a flat road. Ray Brown, another researcher, claimed to have discovered a sunken pyramid near Berry Island, not far from Bimini. He was on a mission to find sunken galleons when he noticed the quote-unquote pyramid, and as he later reported, his navigation equipment malfunctioned right before the discovery, so maybe there's something to this one. Off the coast of Cuba, there's something pretty wild lying underwater: pyramids. Using sonar, researchers found what looks like the remains of an ancient city, complete with giant stone structures. The find was made in 2001 by a marine engineer named Pauline Zalitsky and her husband, Paul Weinswig, owners of a Canadian company called Advanced Digital Communications. Some of these formations are massive, around 400 meters wide and 40 meters tall, or about 1,312 feet wide and 131 feet tall or so. And they're not natural either, at least they really don't seem to be. The way they're laid out suggests they were designed by humans, so the questions are, how old are they and who built them? Some experts think the city could be 6,000 years old, others believe it could go back as far as 50,000 years. Even more interesting, there are strange symbols and carvings on some of these stones, and they don't match any known languages. But they do kind of look a bit like Aztec or Mayan symbols. Ships have been reporting strange sightings in the Indian Ocean for over a century, and it all starts in 1873. On March 23rd of that year, the crew of the ship Adelheid, crossing the South China Sea, spotted a massive, mile-wide disc floating just beneath the surface, glowing with light. Then in 1879, the HMS Vulture crew reported seeing two giant, quote, Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions with spokes 25 feet wide and 100 feet apart. Over the years, there have been more and more of these reports. In 1901, the crew of the SS Kilwa in the Persian Gulf saw rays of light coming from an underwater disc-like object. Then in 1943, sailor Matthew Mangle described a huge glowing disc pacing his ship, also in the Persian Gulf. These sightings didn't just happen once or twice, but across multiple decades and locations, each with similar descriptions of these bright, rotating, glowing discs beneath the water. They're all still a mystery to this day, with no clear explanation for what these massive underwater objects could be. At one time, the city of Neapolis was an important Roman city in Tunisia, until it was destroyed by a tsunami in 365. The same disaster hit Alexandria down the coast, but Neapolis was completely wiped out and stayed lost for over 1,700 years. Then in 2017, after 7 years of digging, archaeologists rediscovered it. Even though Neapolis was a Roman city, it sided with Carthage during the Punic Wars, which led the Romans to mostly just ignore this place in their records. But when they started uncovering this city, they found it was much bigger and more developed than they would have expected. One of the coolest finds was over 100 tanks used to make garum, a popular fish sauce in ancient Rome. And it turns out Neapolis might have been one of the top producers of it. In 2007, underwater archaeologist Mark Hawley discovered something incredible in Lake Michigan, a structure that looks a lot like Stonehenge, known as the Michigan Stonehenge. This underwater arrangement of stones sits about 40 feet below the surface and forms this circular pattern. And some of the stones even appear to be lined up in a straight row, which is certainly strange. So what are these stones doing there? Could they be the remnants of an ancient civilization? The way these stones are laid out suggests they were carefully arranged this way, not formed naturally. One of the most curious finds is a rock with what looks like it might have a mastodon carved into it. And to make it even more mind-blowing, these stones are thought to be around 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. This last one's different from pretty much everything else on this list. It's not an ancient city, but it's creepy all the same. A cemetery of sunken Japanese World War II ships. In 1944, Chuuk Lagoon in Micronesia was the site of Operation Hailstone, where US fighter planes bombed Japanese warships, and today this lagoon is home to over 60 shipwrecks, remnants of that brutal battle. It's all just sitting underwater now, corroding ships, tanks, and cars are even scattered across the seabed. As divers swim through the site, they might find barnacle-covered firearm, old gas masks, abandoned medicine bottles, personal items, all just frozen in time. Some of these wrecks even have the bones of soldiers who died in the battle. It's incredibly eerie, no doubt, but divers will also say the place has a certain beauty to it, a kind of haunting stillness.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have tracks. Okay, so the last thing we want when talking about a huge sinkhole that happens to be in the ocean that holds many different secrets and mysteries at the bottom is to hear that we have found tracks, but we don't know what's causing these tracks. In December of 2018, a team of explorers and scientists decided to finally take a trip down to the bottom to see all there is to find at the bottom of the Great Blue Hole. We'll talk about this expedition a lot today, so remember it. Erica Bergman, who is the chief submarine pilot on the expedition and who is an oceanographer, explained that they had observed tracks at the bottom of the sinkhole, but that they were unable to identify them and that they remain, quote, open to interpretation. This alone isn't the most terrifying thing there, but when we take in some of the other things we know about the hole, like how it's the second largest marine sinkhole in the world, or how there could potentially be an entire cave system lurking somewhere in there, more on that later by the way, things start to get a little more unsettling. It quickly becomes clear that these mystery tracks are only a drop in the bucket of the mysteries of the Great Blue Hole. In our number 9 spot today, we have stalactites. The Great Blue Hole is a really popular diving destination, despite the fact that divers obviously can't go all the way to the bottom for a multitude of reasons. When diving here, you definitely need quite a bit of experience beforehand, and for those lucky ones who have done the work, they might be able to get just deep enough to see the incredible stalactites this sinkhole holds. While these are gorgeous to look at, they are part of the reason that we know some of the most ancient history behind this place at all. Stalactites are only formed when water is dripping down stone. This gave scientists the insight they needed to realize that this wasn't always a place that was submerged in water. In fact, they concluded that this was actually a big, dry cave and one of the most prolific eras in the history of our beautiful planet. This means that at some point there was probably a ton of stuff living in it. They believed that the cave likely formed during the last ice age, so sometime prior to 14,000 years ago, but at the end of the ice age it ended up flooding, collapsing, and thus we have the Great Blue Sinkhole. In our number 8 spot today, we have movements. This is one that really ties into the last one with the discovery of the stalactites. Of course, when they first found them, they took some samples so that they would be able to confirm their above sea formation, and when doing this analysis, it was realized that not only did they form above sea level, but that some of them were off vertical by about 5 degrees, and that these changes were consistent. This gave another very valuable insight into the history of this location and led scientists to the conclusion that there must have been some past geological shift or tilting of the plateau underneath at some point. This event would have been followed by a long period of relative stillness. This change in the stalactites showed us that the land must have been moving as well, not just the sea level rising. It's not the most unsettling thing on this list, but it certainly is cool. It's really amazing how such a small change can show us so much. In our number 7 spot today, we have trash. It has become abundantly clear that there really isn't any place on Earth that is free from human influence, and that most definitely includes our litter. If trash can make it to the deepest depths on Earth in the Challenger Deep, of course trash can somehow find its way down to the bottom of the Big Blue Hole. During that 2018 expedition we spoke about earlier, the team stumbled across more than they were expecting when they found a littered 2-liter Coke bottle, I'm glad it wasn't Pepsi, and they also found a lost lost GoPro. They were even able to see that this GoPro still contained some vacation photos. Safe to say that it's not the most remarkable discovery they made down there, but it should be something that might be a little concerning to us all. In our number 6 spot today we have sand. Like I mentioned before, this sinkhole obviously has an incredibly rich history, and we are just starting to learn about the things that it holds, but it takes time, equipment, and money to really be able to have these sorts of large expeditions like the one in 2018. There might be fossils or other things just waiting to be uncovered that we don't even know about yet, but the clock is ticking. As it turns out, as quickly as the blue hole appeared, it might also be disappearing. Apparently there are waterfalls of sand that are continually falling into the hole, and it's slowly but surely being filled up. It's like a real, very large, kind of scary hourglass, essentially. At least it's not something that's gonna happen overnight, so for now we still have time to admire its beauty and take a look at all of the mysteries it might be holding. Maybe it just serves as a reminder that nothing is permanent, except for the internet. In our number 5 spot today we have more caves. So remember Erica Bergman we talked about before in the first one? She was the one who led the expedition in 2018, the submarine pilot. Well, she didn't only talk about mysterious tracks, she also explained that there is an enormous cavern close to the bottom of the hole. Like a huge unexplored cavern in the middle of a huge mysterious marine sinkhole? I'm just saying, that's more mystery than I can handle. This means that there could potentially be a large underwater cave system, and the Great Blue Hole is just the beginning of it. She said, quote, "The roof has collapsed on this particular cave, but the whole reef could be dotted with similar caverns which simply haven't collapsed into blue holes. Yet. Who knows what these cave systems could be hiding? Undiscovered species? Answers to some of the ocean's mysteries? The possibilities really are endless." In our number 4 spot today we have marine life. So of course this stunning location is a popular tourist attraction. People really want to dive here, and I absolutely cannot blame them. But one thing you may encounter, should you choose this as your next adventure spot, are sharks. There are a few different species of sharks that enjoy calling the waters around the blue hole home. They include bull sharks, Caribbean reef sharks, and hammerhead sharks. Surprisingly, these sharks aren't even at the top of the concerns list when it comes to diving here, as shark attacks truly are quite rare. Sharks are pretty gentle creatures and we're not their favorite thing to snack on, but they are big, they are powerful, and they can do a lot of damage when the going gets tough or when they feel frightened or threatened, and that is just one of the many reasons that this is an area that hopes for more experienced divers rather than a place someone would recommend for their first solo dive. In our number 3 spot today we have nitrogen. Another thing you will likely encounter should you choose to go diving here is something that is actually quite common for those who like to venture and dive in the deep sea. We are talking about nitrogen narcosis. Basically, divers of course use oxygen tanks to help them breathe underwater. These tanks normally don't just contain oxygen, they contain a mix of oxygen, nitrogen, and some other gases as well. This is all fine and well, but the deep sea is not like our lives up here. After about 100 feet, the increase in pressure can alter these gases, and to be honest, the further you go, the more the pressure increases. When these altered gases are inhaled, they can have unusual sort of intoxicating effects on the body. This is something that people who choose to dive here will experience, and it can be disorienting to say the very least. These effects are reversible and should wear off when you get to shallower water, but when you begin to feel the effects, it won't be at the time you're ascending. Your dive instructor will likely be only leading you deeper into the waters. This is all just a long way of saying it's a step you need to be aware of and prepared for. In our number 2 spot today we have toxicity. So the simplest way to put this is that at the bottom of the Great Blue Hole, it is poisonous. After you get about 2/3 of the way down to the bottom, the water is just full of hydrogen sulfide. This means that there is little to no oxygen left down there, which is exactly why any marine creatures that get stuck down there are sure to meet a gruesome fate, but it is also why the water is actually toxic and corrosive. If you get deep enough without the proper protection, this hole will kill you and any other living thing that goes in it. It is truly unforgiving. Some of the experts in that that 2018 expedition said that there were thousands of remains of marine life, like conches, which is a result of these creatures just getting a little too close to the edge. One explorer even said that you could see little prints where the conches presumably were trying to climb back up before being asphyxiated by the toxic water. Yeah, so basically while it looks beautiful on the surface, the Great Blue Hole is just a macabre marine life cemetery. In our number 1 spot today we have remains. By far the most unsettling of all of the discoveries on this list are the bodies of 2 divers that were found during this 2018 expedition. There have been 3 divers who are known to have gone missing after going diving in the Great Blue Hole, and to be honest, we aren't sure which 2 were found or exactly how they died. The reason for this is because, despite the fact that they were found, authorities decided that the best thing to do would be to leave them. Of course, rescue is a complicated process, but they agreed and decided that, quote, they're at peace where they are. It serves as a reminder of how dangerous it can be, even for those with all of the experience necessary.
Starting us off at number 10 are zombie worms or bone-eating worms. Now this creature can grow up to being 2 inches long if it's female, whereas the males are microscopic. Now despite being worms and not sounding all that scary, they can eat rock-hard bones of animals a million times bigger than them, like whales. They secrete acids that allow them to access the inner contents of the bones, and then the symbiotic bacteria converts the bone's proteins and fats into food for the worms. They have feathery branches all over them that help pull oxygen into the worm so it stays alive. They can be found at the depth of around 9,491 feet, feeding on the carcasses of dead whales. I'm okay with worms, but these worms I cannot do. Coming in at number 9 is the vampire squid. It's incredibly fast, incredibly pale. It sparkles in the light. You know what it is. The vampire squid. But if you said Edward Cullen, I wouldn't be mad either. Now the vampire squid is the last surviving member of the Vampira morphida, and therefore they share qualities with both the octopus and the squid. It uses its ear-like fin to swim, and its jellyfish-shaped body helps it swim fast. They can grow up to being 30 centimeters long and vary from being a pale red color to being jet black. When they're on the hunt, they use the photophores covering their body to light up in patterns that confuse their prey. When they're the ones being hunted, they pull the webbing between their tentacles right over their head and just hide in there, kind of like a cocoon. Kind of like I do when I'm having a depressive episode, just in my cocoon. At number 8 we have the deep sea hatchetfish. Now I don't ever use the term fugly because I think it's so rude, but this sour-faced looking fish is actually fugly. The hatchetfish is quite small. They only go up to 3 to 12 centimeters long, which is actually nothing. Hence, as you can imagine, they're quite an easy prey. Despite being disadvantaged by their size, their camouflaging techniques makes them basically invisible to predators. They produce light from their stomach, making them bioluminescent. They control how much light they emit by how much light is in the water at the time. If you reveal your silhouette, then it's game over, so they try and match the light levels in the water so they remain hidden. They can be found anywhere between 50 meters below the surface to 1,500. Filling our number 7 slot is the ping pong tree sponge, aka the chondrocladia. Honestly, when I first saw a picture of this sponge, I thought it was a bunch of balloons on a stick, but I mean, I refuse to judge the creature by its name or its balloon-like structure, so let's get into it. It's thin and long and has little translucent balls at the end of it which look like ping pong balls, hence the name. However, they're actually dotted with tiny hooks, meaning if any prey gets too close, they'll become trapped and then the sponge will just start eating it alive. It is legitimately a flesh-eating sponge that's found 2,700 meters under the surface. Now at number 6 is the Dumbo octopus, scientifically known as the Grimpotethys. Now from the name you can probably guess that this creature kind of looks like Disney's Dumbo the elephant. It has floppy ears on the side, deep set eyes, and 8 short tiny tentacles, and honestly it's quite cute. I wouldn't mind finding that if I was deep underwater. However, you guys know me, I'll never be deep underwater. It can be found at least 9,800 meters deep in the trench, and I kinda want to hug it. The Dumbo octopus can grow up to being 8 to 12 inches big, and they actually travel through the water by flapping their ears. But don't be fooled by their cuteness, because they can still swallow their prey in one single gulp. So I mean, Coming in at number 5 is the frilled shark. Now you guys know how I feel about sharks. I refuse to look at them. I don't even want to think about them. I really wouldn't mind if they went extinct, but that's just me. Now the frilled shark is one of the ugliest variations of the mammal that I have ever seen. They have a snake-like body, but they sort of look like eels and boast a set of 300 teeth, which is insane. Despite living so deep, at least 5,000 meters below the surface, the frilled shark was actually one of the first deep sea creatures to ever be discovered. I don't know how, since they're so deep and frankly terrifying, but facts are facts. The name is inspired by the creature's frilled gills. They've been dubbed a living fossil, so they have very primitive looking features, and honestly when you look at it, you'll know what I mean. The thing looks like it's been alive for 1,000,000 years and it's on its last breath, and hopefully, for my sake, I hope it is. Mic drop. At number 4 is the deep sea dragonfish. I feel like the deeper the creatures are, the uglier they get. Like, why is that the rule of this video? The dragonfish has oversized teeth, a slippery skin that looks like an eel's, and a hideous face. Reaching up to 6 inches long, they can be found between 700 to 6,000 feet below the surface and are known as an assassin. Like most deep sea creatures, the dragonfish is bioluminescent and not only uses it to hide from its predator and prey, it also glows in order to communicate with its own kind. They're ugly because they have this whisker-like lighted barbell coming out from its lower jaw that other fish think is a meal, so they just come closer and closer thinking they're gonna get their lunch, and they're not. You know why? Because it's a trap. It's a trap. Filling on number 3 slot is the barrel-eye fish, and this fish made me laugh so much, I don't even know why. For some reason, it just looks like it's so done with life and it's just so over everything. Like, it's just so mad at the fact that it's a barrelfish. It's like, why me? And you know for a fact if it could talk, you know it'd have those deep voices and it would just take way too long to even complete a sentence. Either way, first things first, this fish has a transparent head. Let's just talk about that. It has 2 barrel-shaped eyes that point upwards, allowing it to see the silhouette of all its prey. They can be found between 400 to 2,500 meters deep, and scientists theorize they have transparent heads so they can get a bit more light inside. Personally, I just think this one is kind of cute. Now, at number 2 is the telescope octopus, found at depths deeper than 6,500 feet. These octopi don't swim horizontally, no, they actually suspend themselves upwards. That makes it harder for predators below them to see their shape. They're almost completely transparent, and the reason they're called the telescope octopus is because they have 2 protruding eyes that not only rotate, they also allow the octopus a much wider peripheral vision. Honestly, they're also kind of cute and small, and their eyes are tiny. They're just very cute little creatures. The octopus, it looks like one of those toys you'd get in a McDonald's Happy Meal. I know this because I have eaten many McDonald's Happy Meals growing up. It's my go-to order, my chicken burger, gotta have it. And finally, at number 1 is the goblin shark. Now I think this creature is by far the ugliest one on the list, which may be why it takes our number 1 spot, I'm not gonna lie to you. Also known as a living fossil, this species is 125 million years old and can be found at depths lower than 4,300 feet. They can grow anywhere between 10 to 13 feet long, and the most prominently ugly thing about them is their snout. It kind of resembles a sword, and its jaws not only protrude, they extend when eating. If that isn't horrific enough, they also have 30 to 50 teeth on their upper jaw and 30 to 60 on their lower. The goblin shark uses sight, smell, and electroperception to track down their prey, but you don't know that much about them since sightings of them are so rare. And that is it for today's video, guys. You already know I don't like the water, I hate sharks, I have such a phobia. You're not gonna find me trying to look for any of these creatures, to be honest. Screw that shit.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have a plastic bag. It is unfortunately no surprise that on one of the deepest dives we as humans have ever been able to accomplish, along with all of the amazing new creatures and never been explored places, there would be none other than a plastic bag. In 2019, Victor Vescovo took a dive into the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, which is an unbelievable feat and not an easy task, and he was rewarded by being reminded of human trash. Despite that little finding, Victor broke the record for deepest dive, which is of course amazing for scientific advancements and research. Every time someone manages to do these things that once seemed impossible, we get closer to revealing more of our ocean's mysteries that lay at the deepest points on Earth, which is very cool. While it would be amazing if the dives weren't plagued with plastic pollution, at least they were able to also discover a bunch of new crustaceans and give us all a little look into what life looks like in the Mariana Trench. In our number 8 spot today, we have comb jellies. Comb jellies are gelatinous creatures that are named for their unique plates of fused cilia, which are called combs. These combs help the jelly move through the water like boat oars, and while other microscopic organisms also have this sort of mechanism, comb jellies are the largest animal with this feature. These combs are also part of the reason that comb jellies are so gorgeous to look at. Rather than bioluminescence, the rainbow light effect that can sometimes be seen on them is from light diffracting off of the combs in all different directions. Many comb jellies have one pair of tentacles, although they appear to have multiple, but that is just caused by their tentacles branching out. I'm saying the word tentacles. These tentacles are used to help them hunt like a sort of fishing line. Aside from this, these jellies don't sting, which is always a good thing. Not that I'm planning on heading into the deep sea anytime soon. In terms of today's list, I'd say these guys are one of the less creepy creatures we've got going on today.
Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have the frilled shark. As if you weren't terrified enough of sharks, this one looks just as terrifying. Although, now that I see more pictures of it, I can't really take it seriously because it just reminds me of Jerry Seinfeld in the frilly shirt. Anyone else remember that episode? Sorry, Jer Bear, the shark wore it better. The frilled shark got its name for its 6 to 7 frilled gills on the side of its snake-like body. But that's not the creepiest part of this shark. The frilled shark has a set of 300 razor-sharp teeth. They can grow up to 6 feet in size, which is 1.8 meters. Even though this was one of the first deep-sea animals to be discovered in the 19th century, it's not the easiest to find. These sharks swim at depths of 16,000 feet, which is around 5,000 meters. However, it is extremely difficult for scientists to study this deep-sea creature. They swim at such deep levels that when brought to the surface, they practically die immediately. Due to those reasons, there isn't much known about the habits and life cycles of these sharks, but maybe this is just one of those things that is better left unknown.
Starting off this countdown, we had the HMS Sea Serpent. In August of 1848, the crew on the HMS Daedalus was sailing in the South Atlantic when they spotted this terrifying creature. According to the ship's captain and several members of the crew, they claimed that the monster was 60 feet in length, with 4 feet of its head raising out of the water. This massive sea beast lurked around the ship for 20 minutes before taking off. To this day, we don't know what it is that they saw. They described it as being a long snake with a dragon's head. Pretty weird and creepy, right? Well, they aren't the only ones who witnessed this too. It was spotted a second time by the American brig Daphne, and in fact, crew on board even shot at it. Scientists claim that maybe they just saw a whale. But come on, a bunch of experienced sailors would know the difference between a whale and something that's not a whale. And at number 9 today, we have the Mary Celeste. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. To this day, the mysterious case of the Mary Celeste is considered one of the creepiest cases in nautical history. Basically, in 1872, the Mary Celeste was found abandoned in the middle of choppy waters. The crew was nowhere to be found. All the cargo on board remained untouched. Now, the lifeboats were missing, which makes people believe that the crew tried to get off the ship and flee. But why would they just abandon their ship like that? Well, we got a number of theories. 1, a sea monster got them. 2, a pirate takeover occurred. 3, they were abducted by aliens, or 4, they consumed bad food and they all went mad. I know, it seems wild. To make matters weirder though, the crew and lifeboats were never found. No one knows what happened aboard that ship. In our 8th spot, we have the Baltic Sea Anomaly. In 2011, a group of divers went out looking for treasure in the Baltic Sea, and they came across something weird. It was a 70-meter long weird object laying 300 feet below sea level. This thing has since been named the Baltic Sea Anomaly, and no one knows what the heck it is. It's just this massive steel-looking structure shaped like a disc with some weird patterns on it. Gets weirder when the divers claim their equipment randomly stopped working when they got closer to the object. There was a massive electrical interference there. So what is this thing? Honestly, we don't know, but some people think it's a glacial deposit left from thawing glaciers. Or it's part of a UFO spacecraft from one extreme to another. Could be either or, who knows. In our 7th spot, we have the 3 men. In 2007, 3 Australian men headed out on an expedition together. 3 days later, their ship was found drifting by itself in the middle of the ocean. The men were nowhere to be found. that's not all. On the ship, they found knives all over the cabin floor, as if there had been a fight and people were scrambling for weapons. What happened to these men still remains a mystery to this day. But of course, we got the theories. One is that they got into a devastating fight and they all ended up dying. Or two, their propeller became snarled in a fishing line. One dude went to go free the line but then fell into the ocean. The second dude tried to save him and then fell in as well, and then so on with the third guy, or who even knows. Okay, we don't know for sure, that's just a theory. The only thing we do know is that this case is pretty creepy. Moving on to number 6, we have the Kraken. So it may just be that the Kraken is real, but it's not what we think it is. In fact, the legend of the Kraken was thought to have been born after a number of sailors spotted giant squids while sailing. So the Kraken might actually just be giant squids. In 1870, a giant squid washed up in New Zealand. Legend goes that it was as tall as the top of a ship's main mast, and it could easily take over a ship by wrapping its tentacles around the hull and crushing it. Is this true? Who knows? But no one believed that giant squids were real until around 2005. That's when scientists caught a photo of one. Then in 2013 they got a video of one. Now they believe there are millions of giant squids out there. The mystery here is, what beast did the sailors encounter in 1870? Was it a ginormous squid, or was it a kraken, or is a squid a kraken? Who even knows, okay? There's just so many questions out there that we need answers to. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cursed shipwreck. Back in the early 2000s, a natural gas company was laying pipeline in the ocean when they came across a shipwreck. Nowadays, this shipwreck is considered cursed or haunted. Let me explain why. So after the shipwreck was discovered, a team was sent down there to check it out. But everything that could go wrong did. First, the exploration sub malfunctioned right as it was getting ready to explore the wreck. Then the Navy sent a research sub down there and it literally self-destructed upon entering the water. Then over the course of a couple of years, other attempts have been made to explore the ship, but those have gone wrong as well. None have been successful. So now it's believed that this ship is cursed and doesn't want anyone entering it. In our 4th spot, we have the disappearing submarines. In 1968, 4 different submarines all mysteriously went missing. As a result, people believe that this can no way just be a coincidence. Something was out there sinking these subs. The subs were the USS Scorpion, the Soviet submarine K-129, a French submarine Minerve, and the INS Dakar. In fact, the French sub and the INS Dakar disappeared only 4 days apart. The French submarine has still never been found. What's weird is that it disappeared only an hour away from its port, so you think they'd be able to track it down, but nope. So what are the odds that 4 massive submarines go missing the exact same year? What could have caused this? We'll probably never know. In our 3rd spot, we have Sylvester Butler Jr. Apparently a number of people mysteriously vanish off of cruise ships each year. Most of them have never been found. Today, let's look at the weird case of Sylvester Butler Jr. In May of 2017, Sylvester boarded a cruise ship headed to the Pacific Islands. While on board though, the crew noticed he was acting weird. He kept to himself, barely talked to anyone else, and housekeeping claimed that he never unpacked his bags. The only charge on his bill was the occasional soft drink he would order to his room. Also, every time the cruise made a stop, he never left the ship. Then somewhere between Fiji and the final port Sydney, crew noticed that he was missing. No one knows what happened to him. And the ship's CCTV footage revealed nothing. It's sad, but theory goes that Butler jumped off the ship and took his own life. Apparently he suffered from a chronic genetic kidney disease, so maybe he wanted to end his suffering, but we don't know for sure. On top of that, I believe that his body was never found. Coming in our 2nd spot today, we have the Stiuso beast. The Stiuso beast is the name given to a massive carcass that washed ashore on Stiuso Island on September of 1808. At first, people thought it was just the body of a shark, but this creature had paws instead of fins. So then people were hella confused. Not only that, but it was 55 feet long. But part of its tail was missing, so clearly this thing was even bigger than that. This beast was described as follows, and I quote, "Its flesh was described as being like coarse, ill-colored beef, entirely covered with fat and tallow, and without the least resemblance or affinity to fish. The skin, which was gray colored and had an elastic texture, was said to be about 2 inches thick in parts." End quote. Not only that, but its bristles glowed in the dark when wet, and the contents in its stomach were red. So what is this beast? The Natural History Society of Edinburgh believes that it is a sea serpent of some sorts. Maybe the Loch Ness Monster or its long-lost brother, who knows. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Orang-Medan. So this next mystery is pretty freaking creepy, I'm not gonna lie. It's gonna keep you up at night. So in 1947, 2 American ships received a distress call from the ship the Orang-Medan. The SOS call was from a crew member that stated everyone on board the ship had died. Then all of a sudden, his SOS ended with his last message being, "I die." When the ships arrived, they found the ship completely unharmed. The entire crew, including a dog on board, had died. Everyone had a terrified look plastered on their face. No one knows what happened to the ship. Theory goes, though, that maybe they were exposed to some dangerous gas and died. That seems to be the most common theory out there. Starting off this countdown, we have the giant cannibal shark. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. Honestly, maybe it is. So in 2003, scientists tagged a 9-foot-long great white shark. They did this in order to study the temperature changes in the ocean. Here's the thing. Several months later, the tag washed up on shore. The shark, nowhere to be seen. They checked the information on the tag, and that's when they were shocked. About 4 months after the tag was put on the shark, it dove to around 1,900 feet. They believe that's because the shark was attacked and eaten by something. But what creature in the ocean is going around eating a 9-foot-long great white shark? They still don't know. It could be a massive sea creature that we haven't found yet. Or they think it might be an even bigger shark, making it a massive cannibal shark. If you're not afraid of the ocean yet, then this for sure has done it for you. Coming in at number 9, we have the lost city of Atlantis. There's a city that lies sunken underwater just off the coast of the Japanese island Yonaguni, making it Japan's very own Atlantis. Many people believe that the city is around 5,000 years old. There are complete pyramids, ruins of a castle, structures etched with faces, and rock sculptures that look like animals all underwater. It's theorized that a terrible earthquake caused the city to be engulfed by water. But to this day, we don't know the true origins of this mysterious underwater city. Conspiracy theorists believe that the CIA destroyed this island in order to expand America's economic zone. Unless we travel back in time, there's no way to find out more about the city and what happened to it. Coming in at number 8, we have Carroll A. Deering, aka the ghost ship of the Outer Banks. So on January 31st, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering was found abandoned off of Cape Hatteras in North Carolina. The crew was nowhere to be found. On top of that, tons of stuff was missing from the ship, including the crew's personal belongings, life rafts, logbooks, and navigational equipment. To this day, no one knows what happened to the crew aboard the ship. But of course, we got some theories. Theory 1 is that a mutiny occurred. Theory 2 is that they were ransacked by pirates. Theory 3 is that they were taking part in rum running. People stole the ship to use for the rum running. And when they were done, they just abandoned the ship and left it there. But like I said before, we don't know for sure. In our 7th spot, we have the electronic fog. Okay, this one is pretty weird, not gonna lie. So on December 4th, 1970, a man named Rob McGregor was flying over the Bermuda Triangle when he was met by this weird tunnel-shaped vortex. He entered it, and apparently his wings sounded like they were scraping along metal. All of the electronic and magnetic navigational instruments malfunctioned. When he looked up, all he saw was a dull gray fog. Also, there were strange clouds forming behind the airplane. They were only in the clouds for a couple of minutes, but claimed that they traveled for 40 minutes. When they got out of the fog, they were over Miami Beach, a flight that would have taken 75 minutes. He believes that this weird fog is what has caused other planes and boats and passengers to disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. So what is this weird electronic fog that he encountered while over the ocean? That's something I want to know. In our 6th spot today, we have the time travel. Legend goes that one day 3 ships were traveling through the Bermuda Triangle. Everything was going fine until they encountered a mysterious fog. When they emerged through the other end of the fog, there were only 2 ships. The other ship was way ahead of them. The crew aboard the ship claimed that the fog transported them back in time several years. There, they saw a bunch of different boats and passengers also sailing. Then they approached the same fog and they got transported back to the current day. Isn't that weird? Was this the same fog the pilot encountered? Like, what is going on in the ocean? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the disappearance of Keith Davis. Now, this case is certainly going to keep you up at night, so just a little warning. So in 2015, Keith Davis, a fisheries observer, headed out to sea with his crew. His job was to monitor all the catches and collect data on it. But about a month later, Keith disappeared off the ship in the middle of the day, in broad daylight. He has never been found. On top of that, the weather that day was calm, and he was an experienced observer, so it's not like he just fell overboard by accident. So what happened to him? Well, theory goes that he knew too much, so someone got rid of him. When police searched his email, they found photographic evidence of illegal things happening on board these ships, like they were allegedly smuggling people. He was also keeping track of a number of rule violations. Not only that, a year before his disappearance, Keith sent a mysterious email to his friends. In the email was a video of 4 men being shot to death while holding onto debris in the ocean. So theory goes that Keith was killed for knowing way too much. But still, to this day, we don't know exactly what happened to him. Coming in at number 4, we have the Ellen Austin. In 1880, a ship named the Ellen Austin set sail to New York from Liverpool. During their travels, the crew spotted a ship floating near the Bermuda Triangle. They approached it and found that nothing was wrong with the ship, but all the crew on board were missing. So they decided to put some of their own crew members on board this mysterious ship and have it come with them. But during the trip, the 2 ships got separated. They were separated for a couple of days before the Ellen Austin spotted the ship once again. However, all their crew on board vanished. There was no trace of them. Now, the story goes on saying that they placed another set of crew members aboard the ship, and once again, the exact same thing happened to those men. They disappeared off the ship without a trace. But that account hasn't been confirmed. Either way, this mystery gave birth to an urban legend. Basically, a cursed ghost ship lurks the waters near the Bermuda Triangle. Those who hop on board will mysteriously disappear without a trace. In our 3rd spot, we have the disappearing aircrafts. In 1945, 5 torpedo bomber planes took off for a 3-hour exercise. But while flying over the Atlantic Ocean, they disappeared without a trace. It all started when the flight's leader noticed that his compass wasn't working properly. So he was worried that they were flying in the wrong direction. He instructed the planes to then change paths, thinking that they were going to then be heading towards Florida. But in reality, they were just traveling deeper into the Atlantic. As the planes started getting close to the Bermuda Triangle, their signals began to fail. The last few things the pilots ever said were, and I quote, "Everything looks strange, even the ocean. And it looks like we are entering white water. We're completely lost." Then the communication was cut completely and they were never heard from again. In our 2nd spot, we have the severed feet. What would you do if you were out on a nice stroll on the beach when you came across someone's missing arm or foot? Believe it or not, this has happened a number of times. Since 2007, severed human feet have been washing up on the shore of the Pacific Northwest. The first was a right foot still inside of a size 12 Adidas shoe. The second was again a right foot, size 12, but it was in a Reebok shoe. Since then, 15 more feet have washed up on shore. To this day, we don't know who they belong to or what happened to them, or even if they were victims of the same killer. It's really freaking creepy if you ask me. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Witchcraft. This is the name of a boat that set sail on December 22nd, 1967. On board was the captain, Dan Burrack, and his friend, Patrick Horgan. The two headed off to get a good look at Miami's Christmas lights. However, after traveling just 1 mile out, they contacted the Coast Guard, saying that the boat had hit something. But there was no damage. Dan seemed to be calm on the call to the Coast Guard and said they just needed a tow to the shore. So they figured that the boat's propeller was just damaged or something like that. The Coast Guard immediately went out, but when he arrived at the spot the boat was said to be, no one was there. It took him only 19 minutes to get there, yet the boat was already gone. Here's where it gets super weird. This boat was virtually unsinkable. Not only did they have life jackets and lifeboats on board, but the boat had a special flotation device installed in it. This made it basically unsinkable. So even if the boat started filling with water, part of it would still be sticking out of the water, so the Coast Guard would be able to see it. And also, they had flare guns on board with them, so if something serious started to happen, they could have set those off. They didn't. The boat and the two friends on board just disappeared without a trace, and to this day have never been found.
In our number 10 spot today, we have the upsweep. We all know how little we know about the ocean, and that includes what kinds of creatures lie in it. So while this mysterious sound out of context probably wouldn't be that freaky, when put into this situation it becomes quite a bit more eerie. This sound is referred to as upsweep, and it was caught when the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory started its sound surveillance system in August of 1991. The sound is apparently more seasonal, with its peaks in spring and fall, but it is unclear if the changing of seasons is responsible for this sound, or if it's coming from something that lurks in the ocean and remains undiscovered. Just for reference, here is a clip of that sound played at 20 times the original speed. It is possible that this sound could be coming from underwater volcanic activity, but considering the fact that this has yet to be proven, I am here to ask the question, what if it's not? In our number 9 spot today, we have Bermeja. Bermeja was an island that could be found on many maps spanning from the 16th to the 20th century, but in a 1997 survey, the island could not be located. In an extensive 2009 study, it was concluded that the island that was once labeled as Bermeja just didn't exist, which left a whole host of questions. The island was supposed to be located just off of the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, which is particularly important because if it did exist, its location would be integral to determining the boundaries for exploitation rights of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. So of course, when this island that's been included on many maps seemingly just doesn't exist anymore, people really began to speculate what could have happened. There are a few major theories with this one. The first is that the original observation of the island was incorrect, and then no one ever went to double check that this island existed. The next being that possible shifts in the geography of the ocean floor, along with rising sea levels, were the cause for this island to completely disappear. The third theory is the most mysterious out of them all, and this is the theory that the island was blown up by the CIA so as to expand the economic zone belonging to the United States. It certainly is not an easy thing for an island to just disappear, so it truly is quite a large mystery about what exactly happened here, and at this point, it is unclear if we'll ever know for sure. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Sarah Joe. The Sarah Joe was a fishing boat that departed from Maui in February of 1979. There were 5 crew members aboard the boat, and when they left around 10 a.m. that day, the skies were perfectly clear, but while they were out at sea, the wind began to change and they ended up encountering a horrible storm. People on shore who were rightfully worried about the crew headed to the shoreline to try and wave the boat back in, but they were unable to locate the boat at all. One of the passengers' fathers even went out on a separate boat in the middle of the storm to try and see if anything could be done, or if he could at least locate the ship, but to no avail. It was presumed that all of the crew members had been lost due to the severity of the storm. The following days of course consisted of many hours of searching, but neither the ship or any of the men were located. Flash forward almost an entire decade to September of 1988, and a member of the initial search team, John Naughton, was on a wildlife expedition on a deserted atoll around 2,000 miles from Maui when he discovered a small boat and a makeshift grave. He left the site as untouched as he could and immediately contacted authorities, who were then able to confirm that the boat was the Sarah Joe, and the person buried in the makeshift grave was one of the passengers who went missing all those years ago. While experts do agree that the boat could have drifted here and it would have only taken about 3 months to do so, this area was surveyed in 1985 and there was no trace of either the boat or the makeshift grave. So where would the boat and this crew member have been from the 1979 disappearance until after the 1985 survey? These are the types of questions that still remain unanswered to this day. There are of course theories, but none that cover all the mysteries this story holds. In our number 7 spot today we have the Yonaguni Monument. Just off of the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, there is a diving location that has a high population of hammerhead sharks, making it a large and popular attraction. In 1986, a diver in the area noticed some formation on the seabed that resembled a structure of some sort. This led to a team of scientists going on a dive to gather more information, and this is when the Yonaguni Monument was officially discovered. The monument is made of sandstone and mudstones, but here's the mysterious thing. Scientists can't agree on its origins. There are some who believe that this is a natural formation, but there are some who swear that it is man-made. The stairs are over 165 feet long and 65 feet wide, which obviously means that they are strikingly huge. There are pretty reasonable arguments for both sides, and considering the fact that this thing is at least 10,000 years old, I guess it's fair that we may not have all the answers, but it certainly is strange that we can't quite figure it out. At the end of the day, I really don't want to meet whatever thing would need stairs this large. In our number 6 spot today we have the Milky Sea phenomenon. This phenomenon is certainly much more beautiful than the name would suggest, and while we kind of know what causes it, there are still many unanswered questions that surround it. The first recorded sighting of this phenomenon occurred in 1846 when Raphael Semmes, who was the captain of the CSS Alabama, spotted it and was horrified by what he was seeing. He wrote, "From the deep blue water into a patch of water so light it startled me. The whole face of nature seemed changed, and with a little stretch of the imagination, the Alabama might have been conceived to be a phantom ship lighted up by the sickly and unearthly glare of a phantom sea." This phenomenon is so bright that it can be seen from the satellites orbiting Earth, and while it looks amazing in pictures, I can only imagine how frightening it would be to see in person when little is known about why it happens. It is believed that the glow is caused by bioluminescent bacteria that grows in all oceans in our world, but in order to produce a glow like we've seen, this bacteria has to be multiplied by billions of trillions, and we don't know how or why this happens. Also, we don't know for sure if that is what is responsible for the glow, it's just our current best guess. Just for the sake of our expansive imaginations, let's say that it really is this bacteria causing the glow. Why does it come to the ocean surface? Why in such great numbers? Every time this happens, it's at unpredictable times, locations, and sizes, so basically it remains a strange but stunning ocean mystery. In our number 5 spot today we have the SS Beichimo. The SS Beichimo was built in Sweden in 1914 and it belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company. This ship was used to trade provisions for pelts in Inuit settlements along the Northwest Territories of Canada. On October 1st, 1931, the ship was ending its trading run and was packed with fur when it became trapped in pack ice. The crew decided to briefly abandon the ship and they traveled over the ice to the nearest town for shelter. Because of the location and the time, it wasn't exactly going to be simple for everyone to be rescued. On October 15th, the Hudson's Bay Company sent an aircraft to save 22 of the members, but 15 remained and began to prepare in case they needed to stay the winter. Because the ship couldn't be heated, the remaining crew members would return to the ship every few days to chip away some of the ice, but also to grab essential items from the ship. On November 24th, there was a powerful storm, and once it had cleared, the Beichimo was gone. The remaining crew assumed that it had sunk, but this is really where our mystery gets started. An Inuk hunter spotted the ship around 72 miles from the camp the remaining crew members had set up, and somehow they ended up locating it, removing the rest of the valuables, and then abandoning it for the last time because it was believed that this ship wouldn't last the rest of the winter. After the rest of the crew was finally rescued, the ship ended up being spotted around 480 miles from its previous sighting. For 40 years after, the Beichimo was frequently spotted floating in different locations, sometimes even providing people with shelter during storms, but was never once captured. In 2006, the Alaskan government began to work on a project to find the Beichimo, but since the most previous sighting, she has never been located again. While the ship is now presumed sunken, it would have been the longest sailing ghost ship of all time. Ships rarely survive for nearly as long while being unmanned, especially in the crushing icy waters. We still haven't found the wreck of this ship either, so perhaps it is still out there floating somewhere. In our number 4 spot today we have the Devil's Sea. The Devil's Sea is like the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific as it lies in a region just south of Tokyo. This area is often thought as some sort of a paranormal area because of the consistent horrible happenings that occur in it. This area is one of the 12 vile vortices in the world, with the Bermuda Triangle being the most famous one. Above the Devil's Sea, planes are known to seemingly just drop out of the sky like something is reaching up and grabbing them. Methane deposits cause large large explosions in the area, and during World War II, this area was the site of over 20 missing submarines. There have also been numerous ships, some twice the size of the Titanic, who have gone missing without a trace after sailing through the Devil's Sea. This is all to say that while we don't really know what lurks in this area, it's probably safest to just stay the heck away from it. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Cassie Nicole. The Cassie Nicole was a boat that set sail from Richmond Hill, Georgia on April 10th, 1990 with 4 people on board. During the second day aboard, one of the passengers realized that the boat was suddenly taking on water, and at this same time the pumps and radio were not working, which left them with little to no options. The crew decided it was time to board a life raft and abandon ship. After a day of floating on this life raft, one of the passengers named Nathan saw the ship's hatch cover floating by them and thought that it might be able to support him better. Once he hopped onto the cover, he ended up losing sight of the other 3 crew members. Later in the day, he saw a freighter go by multiple times, and he was hoping that it had picked up the 3 crew members he had lost contact with. After 3 days of floating at sea, Nathan was finally rescued, but he received the news that the other crew members hadn't been found. Months went by with no sign of the others until a few months later, when Nathan's sister, as well as the owner of the boat, began receiving strange phone calls from someone who was speaking in Spanish. The person on the other line said their name as well as the names of the missing people, and in the final phone call the stranger said, in English, "I'm bringing them home," but there has still never been a sign of them. The family of the disappeared men believe that they may be alive somewhere but are being held in a foreign country, but why? And why would someone say that they were bringing them home only to not do that? In our number 2 spot today, we have the loneliest whale. This whale has been nicknamed the loneliest whale in the world, but the truth is, we don't really know if that's true because we've never actually seen it. This whale, which we don't know if it's a male or a female, or what whale species it belongs to, sings its song like no other whale does. The whale was first heard in 1989 on a hydrophone, and while the calls were most similar to that of a blue whale, there was one striking difference, and that was the frequency of the calls. This whale calls at 52 Hz, with regular blue whales calling between 10 and 40 Hz. Even fin whales are usually heard at 20 Hz, so it's just left everyone stumped as to what could be going on here. A researcher named Bill Watkins dedicated his life to trying to reveal what exactly is going on here, and while he passed away in 2004, he found that this whale was not only unusual, but totally unique. The biggest challenge is the fact that we cannot locate this whale. Their calls can be heard for hundreds of miles, and trying to find one single whale in the vastness of the ocean is next to impossible. Many people have suggested that perhaps the whale is deaf, and this is what has led to its unique song, but of course without the whale, how could we possibly know for sure? In our number 1 spot today, we have the French sailors. Yves Emmanuel Payne and Laurent Hernas were French sailors who were hired to sail a boat to its new owners. Their trip would see them departing from Annapolis, Maryland and heading to Guadalupe, but when they never arrived at their destination, searches quickly began. Unlike many of the other stories similar to this one, there were actually sightings of this ship, most of them occurring along the intercoastal waterway, which was far off from the course the ship was intended to take. Along with these sightings came the frightening news that the witnesses claimed to see a third man on the boat, which made people begin to believe that it had been hijacked, which wouldn't have been all that surprising considering the state of the art vessel they were on. Despite these sightings, the boat was never found, and neither were the men. To add even more strange occurrences to this story, however, around 2 months after the disappearance, a police officer in South Carolina pulled over a speeding car. After a sort of strange encounter with those in the vehicle, it was later discovered that 2 of the 3 men in the car were the missing Yves Emmanuel and Laurent, but at this point, they of course had already been released. What exactly happened here has never been fully discovered, despite this all happening in 1991. Were the sailors kidnapped? Were they part of an elaborate plan to steal the ship, despite their loved ones saying that they would never do such a thing? It all remains a mystery. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Nina. The Nina was a ship that was once the flagship of the New York Yacht Club, but that unfortunately changed in 2013 when it disappeared on the Tasman seas with its owner and 6 other people on board. The ship had left New Zealand and was bound for Australia on May 29th, and it was estimated to be somewhere from an 8 to 10 day trip. The last time the ship was heard from was on June 4th, and it wasn't until June 12th that the search for the ship began after friends and family of those on board began to get worried as the ship was now a few days overdue. The rescuers searched until it was called off on July 6th after they had searched 737,000 square nautical miles and had found nothing. The search was extremely thorough and they still were unable to find anything. No yacht, no debris, no life raft, and none of the people on board. The last communications with the Nina came on June 3rd and 4th as a crew member was contacting a meteorologist and router for Pacific cruisers in order to get some advice on where the ship should go so as to escape a nasty storm they were encountering. There was also an undelivered text message from June 4th that the satellite phone company was able to retrieve that stated that the storm sails had been shredded the night before and that they would update them later at 6 p.m. with the course info. This definitely wasn't an ideal situation, but the message didn't signal that they would have been in immediate distress either. Aside from these messages, there wasn't any other contact that seemed to have been attempted, despite the ship being well equipped with emergency radios, flares, a satellite phone, and all of that sort of thing. Right now, the best guess as to what happened is that the ship may have sunk really quickly following the storms, and it didn't allow any time for the passengers to activate any of the emergency equipment, but at the end of the day, this is all just a guess, and what exactly happened out there still remains a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the mysterious whale die-off. Between 2015 and 2016, there was a mysterious large die-off of whales located in the Gulf of Alaska. The deaths first began to be discovered in late May of 2015 when the carcasses of endangered fin whales were found floating near Kodiak. The total of whales found in the area climbed to 30, with additional reports of 5 other whales found in the waters just off of British Columbia. Because of the difficulties in retrieving the past whales, it was almost impossible to find out what exactly was causing this. The leading suspect was a toxin being produced by algae, but when one of the carcasses that researchers were able to recover was tested, it came up negative for the toxin that they were searching for. It is possible that the decomposition that had already taken place was the cause for this negative test, but it's also equally as possible that this just wasn't the cause in the first place. The good news is that since 2016, this strange and upsetting anomaly has stopped, so the whales are safe. But unfortunately, we aren't any closer to getting answers on what exactly happened here. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Kaz 2. The Kaz 2 was a 12-meter long catamaran that set sail on April 15th of 2007 and was found adrift just 3 days later on April 18th, but without her crew. When the ship set sail, she was carrying 3 crew members, all of which were relatively inexperienced sailors. On April 18th, someone in a helicopter reported seeing the adrift ship, but it wasn't until April 20th that maritime authorities were able to catch up with the boat and boarded it. It was then, however, that they uncovered the bizarre circumstances on the ship. Everything on the ship was perfectly normal, aside from the fact that the crew had just seemingly vanished. There was a meal set on the table waiting to be eaten, a laptop was open and on, the engine was still running, all of the life vests were still on board, and all of the ship's emergency systems were fully functioning. The only out of place things were, of course, the missing crew, the fact that one of the ship's sails was badly shredded, and there was no life raft on board, but it is still unclear whether there was ever one on board. There are many theories as to what may have happened to the crew, but none have ever been substantiated or confirmed, which leaves the fate of the 3 crew members a complete mystery that we may never get the answers to. In our number 7 spot today, we have the disappearance of Bas Jan Adder. Bas Jan Adder was a Dutch conceptual and performance artist as well as a skilled sailor. He set sail on July 9th, 1975 in a ship called the Ocean Wave as he was setting sail to make his single-handed west to east coast crossing of the North Atlantic. He estimated that this trip was going to take around 2.5 months, but it wasn't until 9 months after he set sail that his boat was found unmanned, floating almost vertically in the water. The people who found the ship were Spanish fishermen who then took the boat back to Spain, where it ended up being stolen. Throughout all of this, Baz was nowhere to be found, and even still, over 40 years later, the mystery of what exactly happened remains. There are people who speculate he fell overboard in heavy bad weather, but this is of course impossible to tell, especially with neither the boat or Baz to provide evidence. The information to go on has only been what was provided by the people who saw the boat before it was stolen, so of course that is not nearly enough to really have any questions answered. What happened to Baz on his sailing trip is still a mystery, but I do hope one day we find out at least some answers. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Gulf of Mexico wreck. For almost 2 centuries, this shipwreck went undiscovered and undisturbed until the early 2000s, when a pipeline bisected it, and since then it has been plaguing those who are trying to figure out what mysteries it holds. A team was assembled in order to try and search the wreckage, but every time they attempted, something went wrong that made it impossible for them. Every time they tried, the exploration sub would malfunction right before they were able to begin checking it out. Like, I'm talking about everything, from video monitors going out whenever they fired the thrusters, to the sonar breaking, to hydraulics going haywire, one after another. After this whole ordeal, the Navy sent a research sub that pretty much just ended up self-destructing its own rover once it got into the water, and when it made its way to the wreck, its arms were too short to reach anything to collect. So this is all to say that it seems like whatever mysteries this shipwreck is holding, they are destined to remain as such. I'm starting to think that maybe this shipwreck is cursed. In our number 5 spot today, we have the disappearance of George Smith. George Allen Smith and his wife Jennifer Hagel Smith had just married and were aboard the MS Brilliance of the Seas, which is a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, as they were doing a Mediterranean cruise for their honeymoon. On July 5th, 2005, the ship was somewhere just off of the coast of Turkey when it was discovered that George had disappeared. The night he was last seen, he was intoxicated from both alcohol as well as prescription drugs, and there was blood evidence found in his cabin as well on the side of the ship. There were 2 main theories in regards to his disappearance, the first being that his intoxication led to him falling overboard the ship, and the other was that perhaps a robbery had gone bad and foul play had been involved. This case was investigated for over a decade, with even the FBI and their mafia division getting involved at one point. But despite this, neither George, his body, or what really happened to him has ever been found. There have been many assumptions made over the years, but 16 years later, it is still a mystery. In our number 4 spot today, we have the MV Tai Ching 21. On November 9th, 2008, a Taiwanese fishing vessel was found floating, but it was empty and had been totally gutted by fire. The 50-ton ship had obviously suffered a fire, but since there was no smoke anymore, it was clear it had been a few days since the fire was put out. Upon inspecting the ship, it was realized that the ship's lifeboat, along with its 3 life rafts, were missing, not to mention the crew of 29 missing men. The last transmission from the radio of the ship was on October 28th, but after that, nothing had been heard from the members of the crew and there was no mayday call ever received. The search for the missing men spanned 21,000 square miles or 54,000 square kilometers, and searches were conducted by both the US Air Force as well as the New Zealand Air Force, but unfortunately the search turned up no results. The last radio transmission from the ship was a personal call from the captain to his wife, which took place on that October 25th, but that was the last time anyone had heard. There still hasn't been any sign of the missing 29 crew members, which of course is absolutely devastating. It is clear they must have abandoned the ship after the fire started, but their fate from there remains completely unknown. In our number 3 spot today, we have the disappearance of Rebecca Corium. Rebecca Corium was a British crew member and youth worker on the Disney Wonder cruise ship in 2011. In the early morning hours of March 22nd, Rebecca was seen on CCTV footage in the crew lounge speaking to someone on the telephone, and it appears as though the conversation was a bit emotionally distressing for her. A few hours later, people began to worry because Rebecca hadn't shown up for the start of her shift, which was really unlike her, and when people went to go and see if maybe she had slept in or something like that, they were unable to locate her anywhere on the ship, which of course made people even more worried. That CCTV footage of Rebecca is the last known sighting of her, and since then no one has been able to figure out where she went or what happened to her. The first assumption was of course that perhaps she had gone overboard, and it prompted extensive searches of the waters in the area, but unfortunately nothing turned up. Almost an entire year after her disappearance, someone emailed Rebecca's family to say that she was 85% sure she had seen Rebecca with a man on the streets of Venice, but unfortunately this potential lead didn't turn up any real evidence or clues. Many people state that perhaps Disney Cruise Lines know more about what really happened, as other crew members have suggested that the entire ship is covered with so many cameras that there's no way that whatever happened could have been missed, but of course there's no evidence that has been discovered which would prove these allegations. It has been 10 years since Rebecca's extremely mysterious disappearance, and still no one knows exactly what happened on that terrible night. Hopefully one day some answers are found so Rebecca's family can get the closure that they deserve. In our number 2 spot today, we have the disappearance of Jim Gray. Jim Gray was an incredibly important computer scientist who was responsible for many computer advancements that changed things for all of us. Other than being a computer scientist, he was also an experienced and skilled sailor, and one day on January 28, 2007, he set sail for a short trip so he could head out and spread his mother's ashes, as she had recently passed away. As he began his trip, Jim spoke to his wife on the phone and said he would call her once he got back in range. After their phone call, he called his daughter as well and left a little message for her, and then he was off on his trip, but unfortunately he never ended up returning. Jim's wife Donna was the one who raised the alarm bells as she was away on a trip, but like I mentioned, Jim said he would call her later, and he never did. At this point is when the huge searches began. Thousands of images of the area where Jim or his boat might be were uploaded to Amazon Mechanical Turk for people to look through and see if they could find any kind of signs, but to no avail. Jim also had an automatic emergency position indicating beacon on his ship, but whatever happened to Jim and the ship clearly didn't meet the requirements, or perhaps it had some sort of malfunction, or maybe it was even turned off. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jim or his boat, as no sign or trace of either has ever been found. The theories of what may have happened are endless and range from Jim intentionally disappearing, to him being kidnapped for his computer skills and brain in order to do some kind of inside job, and really everything in between. There most definitely are theories that are seemingly more likely than others, but at the end of the day, they are all a possibility. In 2012, Jim's widow asked the court to declare him dead in absentia, which ended up being granted, so as of 2012, Jim has been declared dead, but that does not mean that he is. In our number 1 spot today, we have the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 21st, 1998, Amy and her family boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, which is a Royal Caribbean cruise ship en route to Curacao. On March 24th, after a fun night on the ship, Amy was hanging out and having a couple of drinks with the ship's band, and one of the members explained that she parted ways with them around 1 a.m. After this, around 5:15 a.m., Amy's father said he saw her sleeping on the cabin balcony. Unfortunately, however, once 6 a.m. rolled around, she wasn't there anymore, and this was the beginning of the mystery. Once it was realized that Amy was missing, extensive searches were launched for full days before they ended up being called off when no signs or traces of Amy had ever been found. While this is all super mysterious and nobody really had anything to go on, the plot only thickens with this story. After her disappearance, people began to report seeing Amy. One sighting was by Canadian tourists in 1998 who said that they had seen a woman who resembled Amy and who had tattoos that matched hers on a beach in Curacao. A member of the United States Navy said that he saw her in a brothel and said that she told him her name was Amy and she asked for help, saying she wasn't allowed to leave. The most recent alleged sighting comes in 2005 when a woman claimed she saw Amy in a department store in Barbados. She said that Amy entered the restroom with 3 men who then threatened her if she didn't follow through on some sort of deal. The men left briefly, and the witness said the woman turned to her, said that her name was Amy and that she was from Virginia and needed help, but the men returned right after to take her away again. This story is devastatingly sad and has so many turns, and to this day no one knows exactly what happened to Amy or if these witness sightings are accurate at all.